Welcome to the Crew Up North podcast. My name is Jennifer. Today on the show, I'm interviewing someone who has one of the most essential and yet sometimes underrated technician positions in film, Grip Tyler Emms.
But I've done every job in terms of being a grip, and I like them all for different reasons.
Tyler has been working in the Northern Ontario film industry for 15 years and quickly advanced to key grip very early in his career. And did you feel ready for it at that point?
Oh God, no.
His hard work can be seen on a variety of productions, including The Sinner and the multi-award-winning Canadian crime series, Cardinal.
37, I was able to knock off my bucket list movie, which was to do a big budget zombie movie, which...
Resident Evil?
Awesome, yeah, which was awesome enough, was part of a big franchise.
That shot in Sudbury?
Shot in Sudbury and Hamilton.
From shaping light to creating captivating camera movements, Tyler is one of the crew members I've known the longest, and I can't wait to talk about his career right here on the Crew Up North.
I hope you don't get used to this, leaving you so little to believe in.
We came to the determination that he was Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel's love child, because he looked like a little mini Art Garfunkel with the curly hair and weird hat, and yeah, he was an interesting fellow.
That's for sure. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're already digging into the snacks, and I don't blame you. They look really good. So today I got a little appetizer platter from the Moose, and I got the game platter. So we've got nachos, deep fried pickles, deep fried mushrooms,
Jalapeno poppers,
Can't forget
those,
and potato boats.
And the moose room caps.
The moose room caps instead of mushroom caps. Amazing. So, your position is something that is not as, I would say, commonly known when you say that you are a grip. So how would you describe a grip?
For the most part, we are anti-lighting.
Okay.
The Sparks, the electrics, they put up all the lights. We do all the fun flagging and stuff in front of the lights that creates the shadow of the look. And then we're beyond that essentially set engineers, because anytime you watch a behind the scenes and you see cameras mounted on like cars and stuff like that, the director of photography walks up, says, I want the camera here. It's up to us to figure out how to get it there for them. So we get to play with pipes and clamps to figure out how to get the camera where they want it. Tracks, dolly movement, that's all part of my world, as much as we'd like to hand those people off to camera, because dolly grips tend to be more tied to camera than any of the other grips in the department. Mm-hmm. But they're responsible for building the shots with the camera team and the director of photography. They get to push around the fun little buggies, and on shows like something like What We Do in the Shadows, they play catch and release with the camera. The camera op does all the work with it all handheld, and then the dolly grip stands there and takes it and holds it in between takes. Sometimes it's exciting, sometimes it's a lot of that. Mm-hmm.
Is it the same for Steadicam as well?
Yeah.
There's always someone sort of behind.
It's always dependent on the Steadicam op, how much the dolly grip actually gets their hands into things, but for the most part, yeah, they're there to support the camera team. We recently changed the name from dolly grip to dolly/camera support grip, because up here we get a lot of smaller shows that either don't have the budget for multiple dollies, but camera still wants that support personnel, so they need to still be paid at the same rate as a regular dolly grip, even though they may never touch a dolly. They're still there supporting camera. It's one of the more intricate positions within the grip department, and when you see those behind the scenes things, 9 times out of 10, if you're seeing grips, that's who you're seeing. The rest of us, we try to hide. We come in when we're needed, which is before setups, after setups, to rearrange the lighting. Like I said, the Sparks, the electrics will put up the lights, and then we do all the builds in front of it to actually shape and create the light. It's an integral part of the general overall look that the director of photography is shooting for. Um,
Do you get a creative say in it, or is it more like the DP is telling you which direction to go?
Different strokes for different DPs. Some have enough trust in their department heads, their keys, their gaffer, and their key grip to just say, I want it to look like this. However you need to get it to look like that, go ahead. Others
Okay.
are super particular. It's like, I want this particular diffusion on this light doing this particular, cut on the wall or whatever. So it all depends on my boss at how creative I get to be in the position. I've lucked out and worked with some good ones in the past. I've worked with some terrible ones in the past. Ones that are just so hell-bent that, they know all and you know nothing. And, they have to micromanage every little thing you do. Whereas there's other directors of photography who will just be like, I just need that light softer. Do something to make it softer, and
Okay.
then we get to play. And like with the car rigging thing, that's where I find our creative muse kind of comes in. Is we're given the basis of information: camera here, lens here. Okay, can I use suction cups? We got to talk to picture cars to see what we can clamp onto this car, if we're having to use, like I said, suction cups or black arms. Do you want motion? A lot of that we just determine with other departments, leaving everyone else out. But I've done every job in terms of being a grip, and I like them all for different reasons. Like I was going back to Ashley's podcast, sometimes it's just nice to turn your brain off and have someone else do the thinking. We call it neck down gripping, because you're not thinking, someone else is telling you what they want, and you just go ahead and do it. It's the more physical task, but sometimes it's the less mentally exhausting. You don't have the weight of the world on your shoulders. I kind of glazed over being an assistant key because I went from third to key very early on, as so many people up here did in the early days of film, because as other people have explained on the podcast, it was get people into higher paying positions so we can get that much more money back from the government grants and stuff like that. I was a product of that. I started keying after about 2.5 years.
And did you feel ready for it at that
Oh
point?
God, no.
No.
Knowing what I know now, there's no way I should have been doing some of the things I was doing. I didn't understand structures and the engineering side that goes into what rigging grips do. You pray nothing goes wrong, but the potential, a gust of wind comes the wrong way. You've now, take for example something like Born to Be Blue, where we had to build on a 120-foot crane. We built a giant softbox, which is a bunch of materials and pipe and lights built onto a wired crane. Gust of wind, and you haven't tied something off properly, we're hitting that giant bowling pin at the bowling alley in Sudbury.
Oh God.
Didn't happen, but it could have. I mean, that happens to the big shows too. Like, cranes have blown over on shows. There was a major production in Toronto just recently where a 135-foot crane blew over in a microburst of wind.
No.
Yeah, it happens. So, I mean, there are precautions you could take, and being advanced so quickly, I may have not have known all those precautions at the time. But much of what we do is very on-the-job learning. You learn it as you go. I was just kind of like pushed through a lot of it because they wanted those tax credits.
I find that the industry is very much, and I don't know if it's really changed a whole lot, but I mean, other than I guess if you go to Canador, and I hear that they teach a lot of the technical side of things, but yeah, a lot of it is on the job training. Like you're learning it as you're doing it.
And in school they can, like, I didn't go to film school, so I can't, but I've trained at enough or done introduction courses at enough to know that the materials they have pale in comparison to what you see on a major set, where you've got multiple telehandlers all with frames that all move and change at their own pitch, and you've got lighting rigs on lifts, and it's all stuff that, no offense to a student production, they obviously don't have the budget for, and they just couldn't produce that size of production.
Right.
So when you walk into that on a real set, it's kind of mind-blowing, really. It looks like a construction site.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what Justin Kelly was saying, the
It's-
producer and production manager, yeah.
Justin and I go way back. I've known him, God, 12 years? Yeah, 12 or 13 years now. Yeah, no. It's I'm doing that a little more and more and a little too much now. It's just like not reliving the quote unquote glory days, but I'm like, wow, has it been 15 years?
Well, yeah, we were just talking about off camera that Oliver Sherman, which is one of the first
That
shows.
was my second show ever, and
Yeah.
it started literally the next day after my first one ended.
Wow, and that was 15 years ago.
Yeah,
you
it
were
was
saying.
2009, fall of 2009. It's 15 years. This August was my actual like 15-year anniversary, which was Kids in the Hall. Death Comes to Town, which
That was a
you know,
fun one.
yeah. When they didn't have an infrastructure on how to hire people, and they just put it on the radio. That's how I got my first job in film, folks. I answered a radio ad, and I've been doing it since, with a brief stint as you know, as Kids Cover Your Ears, but Mall Santa.
That's right. Yes, and
Thanks.
I did hire you for that.
26 years old, playing Santa in the mall.
We got a few complaints of like, oh, he looks young. I was like, you know what? I don't know what you want me to say.
The college kids loved it. Just saying. Santa be like throwing up gang signs.
It was a fun experience, but
But that
it's nice
was
that you can do film full time now.
Yeah, but that was the early days, right? Like we didn't know.
No, and
know
I was
anything,
working full time too and doing some film stuff.
I
on the
didn't know
side.
anything about EI or anything like that, which if you're starting out is a bit of a godsend because it lets you sit and wait for the next one and you're paying into it. I didn't have any idea how any of that worked. So
We as actor, we don't. It's very sad.
I'm an incorporated business now. I don't either, so it's like squirrel away the cash while
Okay.
I can. But in the early days, when you first start out as crew, it's a good net to have.
So when Kids in the Hall comes around and you hear the radio ad, and what made you get into the gripping department specifically?
So I happened to leave in my resume. I played high school football. And in my phone interview, the best boy electric, the first thing he says to me is, I'm thinking he's going to ask about leadership and, because I was team captain and stuff like that. First thing he asked me in the phone interview is, how big are you? So, I don't know, 6'3", 240, 250. Good. Because in his mind, if I don't learn a bloody thing, I can still carry their heavy shit around.
Right.
As it stands, becoming a grip, I owed to the other daily who was... we'll just say not the most active of gentlemen. The grips didn't really care for his inability to work, so I was supposed to be flip-flopping between departments with this guy, and the grips had me for a couple of days, and they didn't want the other gentleman back. He stayed as an electric for the rest of the show, and I fell in really good with the key, a gentleman named Bob Harper, who's since retired from set gripping. He now does things like the process trailer. He does the techno cranes for bigger productions like Star Trek and stuff like that, but he just basically handed me a career and was like, you seem to be picking it up quick, your work ethic's good, here's your next show. And if he heard about something coming up north, he'd call me and say, hey, send your resume to these people. Or if I heard something, I could call him and say, hey, do you know anyone on this? Because we all know each other apparently. And and
Especially in those days.
well, yeah,
yes.
when he had a very specialized set of skills when it came to the car stuff. So when process trailers and that came up, he was who the rental houses sent up here all the time, and he's who I request now. But yeah, he basically just kept me going for 2 years. I ran into him at a rap party. He says, I used to worry about Tyler because he would hear about a show coming up and he would say, Tyler'd call me and, do you know anyone? And you're all panicked and freaked out. And now he doesn't call me anymore, so I know he's fine. Because you start to develop your own connections, and you start, like people like Justin, where if you do a good job for him, he's gonna keep bringing you back. And I went on a run for him. God, more shows than I can count at this point. You always take what any producer says with a grain of salt, because it's not an official thing till the deal memo's signed.
Right.
So sometimes we start shows and sometimes we think we're starting shows and we don't. That happens with all producers and different scenarios. Like something like Gen V this year, for example, no one knew if they were going to be doing season 2 of Gen V because they had an actor die. Wow. Not on set, but prior to the season starting, they had a main actor pass away untimely, and no one knew what was going to happen, whether they were going to shoot the show or not. Or my understanding is they did shoot the show and recast, but it happens. Unforeseen reasons. So even once the deal memo signed, sometimes the future is uncertain. But yeah, like Bob basically, until I could walk on my own, just kept spoon feeding me work up here. Tried me get me into the union down south. I did it for a little bit. Turns out I hate commuting to Toronto.
But you still do it sometimes.
I do it because it pays the bills, and it's a different world down there. Like, you know, I remember having to scrounge for finding anyone who knows what a sandbag is. Now I make a phone call or type in on the website, and I can find specialized guys who do telehandler and fly swatters and dolly grips and all at the
Tell me what a fly swatter is. Because I was going to use that term earlier, and then I was like, I don't know how to describe it.
A fly swatter is a telehandler, which is basically a giant forklift, and we build some kind of diffusion frame on it. Given the size of the machine, it lets us get bigger with them. And they come with these specialized motors that will let you change the pitch and yaw. It's kind of like flying a helicopter, but it's just a big frame that creates some kind of diffusive look over the actors.
So like, if it's a really sunny day, it's helping create...
Exactly. Okay. Or if it's a rainy day, it's being used to literally stop the rain.
Gotcha.
But yeah, normally it's to control the natural sun around you when you're shooting exteriors. But it looks like, for all intents and purposes, a 30-foot by 40-foot fly swatter.
Right.
The motors come from a specialized rental house in Toronto. They let you change, like I said, the pitch and the angle and everything. And now they've gotten into using what they called roto telehandlers, so the whole arm spins like this.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you can plant the base once and just reach out over top of everyone. Whoa. And it really is a game changer. Let me get this. Oh God.
Yeah, get some snacks. So as a key, you would also be part of prep, correct?
Mm-hmm. Although much less than most other departments.
Okay. And so working with the DP, I'm guessing you're going on tech scouts and things like that. Is there a conversation in prep about if you need specialized equipment to get a certain look, or you guys discuss that as you go?
And prep is different from show to show to show too. Like, for example, if you're doing an episodic TV show that's going to run for months at a time, you're prepping the whole time while you're shooting.
Okay.
If you're doing a feature, you're going to prep at the start and then maybe one or two locations throughout the show as the locations change or they've added scenes and suddenly they need this. But in prep, yeah, we go to each location on the Tech Scout. We talk about what particular look the DP wants to see. You know, like, for example, this TV show I worked on out east called The Sinner. We were shot at this place called The Ovens, and if you've never been there, it's this beautiful cliff face that's like 200 feet up over the ocean, and they say, okay, when we come here and shoot, we want to get a camera out over the edge and pan back and look at Bill Pullman, who's standing on the cliffside. That's something you talk about in prep as a grip.
Right.
Because that now involves a lot of days of planning, like what crane, how do we get it there, because it's like walking paths in there.
So you guys would need the crane for the camera.
Yeah, it's specifically called a camera crane. It's a similar to what you would think in terms of like a construction crane, but it's much smaller. Like you can get 50, 30 foot, 10, even down to 10 foot size cranes that have a camera mount on the end, and it's all done by remote now, and the camera head can do this on the end. And
cool.
That particular one involved my rigging team going out the day before and bringing out a really old crane because it was the only one that was what we call modular, so you could break it down into much smaller pieces because they had to walk each piece in individually, and you know that includes dolly track, the crane itself, any packing or cribbing, as we call it, like the wood that we use to make the track level, because every piece of track has to be perfectly level, especially when you're dealing something like a 30-foot crane, because the slightest bit of unlevel and the whole thing can topple over. and
Yeah.
you don't want that happening on a
No.
200-foot cliffside. But that's all things that we discuss in prep. Something that's episodic, you're doing that. Like, for example, this last show I worked on, my key would go 2 days out of every episode. He would just be gone because he would be off prepping the next episode. He'd be going on scouts to see what's coming for the next one so that he can relay to me as his assistant key to order all the gear and make sure we've got the right amount of people for these days. And he ultimately does that planning. I, as his assist, would go ahead and do all the orders for his planning. On a feature, you would have your key and your assistant key both on the scout to do the planning together with the director of photography and the gaffer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when you're shooting an episodic, I'm now suddenly, as the assistant key, the only one who knows what's going on in a day when the key's away.
Right.
So I stay behind to kind of direct everyone else.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a... The poppers are really good, by the way.
Are they?
Yeah.
Did I take it out? No, I don't think I did.
No, get in there.
Okay.
As I wipe cream cheese on my on my pants.
I think that's the only way to do it.
But
I think I remember seeing that on SkyMed though is because they were shooting the series, you know, like all of the episodes back to back, is that whenever the tech scout would happen for the next block, the key would be offset.
Yep.
And then I would notice on the call sheet that it would say tech scout or prep or whatever. And then there would be a note about the assistant moving up for that day.
Sometimes it's the assistant key on an even bigger show like the last one I just worked on called Accused.
Oh,
I kept
God, these
calling
are
it
good.
The Accused. We just picked one of our thirds to be the key because I still had so many responsibilities as the assistant key in the day that I tried it for the first block. And, you know, I'm trying to book dailies on my iPad while looking at the monitors, while listening to the DP, while helping set deck behind me. It was just one too many things. So we just picked one of our thirds to get the upgrade for the day. And I got to keep my job and hang out in the truck and make sure everything was ordered and organized. And there's a lot of jobs you can do on set as a grip at the same time. Key and assist key, I'm not so fond of, just because it's a clashing of two different work styles, I guess. Because, like I said, as the assist key, you're the pencil pusher. Sometimes you need to be strapped to a computer, which is a lot easier with a phone nowadays. But I'm getting older. I still need the bigger screen.
That's fine.
I'm just now going to my first pair of progressive lenses.
Are you now?
Yeah, I'm getting old.
Or maybe you've been staring at the monitors for 15 years.
Yeah, that too. Bright lights, that'll do it.
So you do have to stare directly into lighting, do you not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
quite often. I mean, I'm one of the few people that when I wear sunglasses at night, it's because I'm not trying to be Corey Hart. It's just because my eyes are now burnt out after 15 years.
Wow.
Like, it takes its toll. You know, like I know Ash's hair has back issues from standing all day, and our eyes go, and physically we get broken down because, like you said, it's 12 plus hours a day of slugging gear or standing and being in awkward positions because, you know, you can't put a stand there, but Jennifer Tilly needs a perfect little splash of something shadowy right here. And the only way to do that is to stand there in this awkward position with a flag doing this.
I was actually going to bring up a story from, I think it's been renamed, but Sleigh Bell Sweethearts. And I remember when
The Northern Lights of Christmas.
Northern Lights of Christmas. And I remember us shooting inside of Canadore College. Like there was like this long hallway. And they were trying to figure out, I guess there was a lot of directional lighting coming from above.
Yeah, everything was just this basic fluorescence like are in here.
And you guys had to take, I'm not sure of the terms, but you had to take...
I think that was like a 6x6 like silk or something silly.
And you had to walk. You and someone else had to walk with the actor as they were doing a walk and talk. What is that called again? A Hollywood or something?
Yeah, Hollywood, where one or multiple grips are basically carrying the lighting along with them. The electrics do it too for like walk and talks. They've got battery pack mounted lights. We end up either carrying small bounces around where we're bouncing the light or something overhead where we're controlling really ugly lighting that's coming from above that they can't do anything else about.
I remember watching that, just being like, that is so cool. And I also felt so bad for you guys because it looked so awkward to have to like hold it and carry it for that long.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's, you're doing that just because someone didn't show up fast enough with the stand, and now you're stuck there holding it. That was a case where we actually had to move with the actors because the camera was moving with the actors. If the camera's planted, we can be planted, but if the camera's moving or it's backing up or getting close to the shot's getting wider or narrower. So at one point, if we're not walking with them, suddenly we're in the shot. It's all very awkward. It's put me in productions because of it sometimes. Like you're now suddenly stuck in like the party scenes and Tricksters, store parties. I'm in those scenes.
Oh, so you're doing like fake background just because you have to be holding something?
Yep.
Wow.
I had to there was no other way to do it because we were doing this big Steadicam walk through a group of people at like a backyard bush party. And once the Steadicam made this particular turn, suddenly they could see their own shadow. So I had to stand there in the shot for the first part, and then once he makes that turn, I had to grab a flag from behind a chair and run and block a light so that he wouldn't see his own shadow anymore. It's
Is that something that would have been Steve, right?
That was Steve, yeah.
The DP. Was that something that he comes up with, or was it something that you're like, okay, I can do this?
Well, that one was a little bit of both. Steve said we need to get rid of the camera shadow, so he suggested that I follow along, but because of being so intertwined in the crowd, there was no way I could beat him there, so the only way to do it was just to be there already, which becomes a whole other thing because now there's actor rule involved.
Right.
And so you got to go to the PM and say like, hey, I got to do this lighting gag, but it involves me having to be in the shot. Normally the answer is we'll deal with it after. Go ahead and do what you got to do. And I'm never credited for anything like that. Like I'm not I'm not party goer number 3 or anything. I'm just the Grip who had to get in the shot.
Yeah, you're just regular background.
Yeah, which I've done now for the first time, and I understand so much more. I did 8 days of background on Shoresy.
Did you?
I did, yeah, because I had nothing going on. Ash is the head of department.
Yeah.
And I just figured it'd be an easy way to see her and get paid. And I knew everyone on the crew anyways, and like I was getting special treatment. And,
Nice.
like, don't tell, but the craft lady first day was like, you can go on the craft truck. But I'm like, but I'm not actor. I know that's not allowed. She's like, you can go on the craft truck.
Yeah, they're usually pretty good about, if they know you. Even on big BG days, like like hundreds of people type of thing, usually even actor isn't allowed to go on the truck. But if they know you, they're like, okay, you can, just come on.
Slide in. Get yourself a peanut butter and jam sandwich. But yeah, that was an interesting experience. And I get why people do it. I couldn't personally do that. And it's so much sitting around.
Yeah.
I need, when I'm at work, I need to be doing something. Like, it was like a key normally is stand by the director of photography, relay, and you're done, and your guys do everything. One of the hardest things that was for me to break as a key was to not be hands-on. So I could be there for the director of photography, but I feel like I need to be doing something physical. As I'm now over 40 and still doing what I'm doing, I'm noticing less and less that I'm liking this, being able to take my hands off the gear stuff.
Right. The show that you just wrapped, you had a sort of a change of positions on that.
Yeah, I went because I've been a long-term key, and I maybe a few weeks here and there I had been an assistant key, formerly known as Best Boy. This was the first time I signed on as a show as the full-time Best Boy, and it was for close to 4 months.
Oh, wow.
And it was working for my former assistant key, who bested for me for the better part of 9 years. So it was a really interesting dynamic to flip the roles between myself and Wayne. But because we have that history, it made things all the easier in my mind. Like, he would say something and I would know what he's talking about before anyone else in the room, really. Like, I would just understand, and vice versa, and we'd be open to each other's suggestions, because some keys are very much, this is the way it's got to be, this is how I want it done. Whereas when you've got a relationship like that, you can make a suggestion to them, and it's not going to be looked at like, who's this kid trying to, step on my toes is key or
Right.
whatever. I have a similar relationship with a lot of my guys that have been with me for longer than I can remember. Guys like Kyle Borgicelli, who's been my third grip since, God, almost as long as I've been a key.
Oh. He's great too.
He is, and he can do every job on set, including mine. He just doesn't like dealing with the production side of things. He just wants to show up and do his job, which for him, he likes being the third or the lead grip, which actually I didn't mention earlier. The lead grip's a new position. We've kind of we've snagged it from the West Coast contracts.
I don't think I've seen it on a call sheet yet.
SkyMed had one.
Okay.
It's utilized a little different from key to key. Some will call their on-set third their lead grip. For me, the lead grip is the gentleman who's organizing all the other thirds, taking that off the assistant key's plate. So the assistant key doesn't need to be there on set, making sure the thirds are doing their jobs.
Is that for bigger shows?
Yeah. If I've only got 4 grips, though, the way the contracts work is you can't skip over a position to pay someone less. So you have to have your key, assist key, best boy, and then if there's only 1/3, that third automatically gets the lead rate. If there's 2, one gets the lead, one gets a regular third rate. It's $1, I think, more an hour or something like that to be the lead, and he's just helping with the on-set organization, making sure the thirds are putting things away in the right spots, or making sure...
Like on the truck?
Sometimes on the truck,
on
sometimes
set?
directly on set. They're the ones that are, they'll wander around and make sure the thirds have bagged all the lights, or, the third who's been in the washroom for the last 45 minutes, they'll, I haven't seen so-and-so in a while, so that we know that we can, check and make sure they're either they're okay or just not, for lack of a better term, fucking the dog.
Right.
Which you find a lot of in bigger productions, is you find people that are just there to collect a paycheck and go home.
Oh.
Yeah, it's something I, as an assist key on this last show, I dealt with for the first time. It's just like every time you need someone, they're not around. It's because they're spending an extended amount of time at the craft table, or talking up the cute locations girl, or they know they're not coming back tomorrow anyway, so why do they need to care what I'm asking them to do today? Yeah, it's a weird dynamic that comes with the bigger shows.
So
that's
bigger
why,
isn't necessarily
no,
better team.
it's not always better to be bigger. Yes, we get more bodies when we need them, but you're not necessarily getting the same quality. Sometimes it's quality over quantity. Like, I would take 3 Borgs over 6 dailies from Toronto any day.
Borg is Kyle also.
Yes, sorry.
That's his
Kyle
nickname.
Borgicelli, we call him Borg. It's really weird going to a DP and saying, well, Kyle's going to take over while I run to the washroom. Because I
Right.
never call him Kyle.
Yeah.
So he's just been Borg. But, yeah, like I was saying originally about him, is he can do anyone's job on set in the department, just chooses to not advance himself any further than he needs to. He has no interest in being a key unless it's like a second unit where I'm still doing all the work. Because in second unit world, the set key and your key riggers are still doing all the planning. You just put someone else in charge on the day when it comes.
Okay.
Kyle will do that. Borg will do that. Because he doesn't have to plan. He just shows up and tells everyone else what they're doing for the day. We're still the ones ordering the gear. He literally shows up and does whatever the second unit DP wants for him. I like second unit. There's not as much stress. I mean, there's always the stress of making sure things run smoothly and safely, but the pre-planning, oftentimes like things like the tech scouts and that, you don't worry about. You just show up on the day and do the job of a grip and get paid to tell other people what to do when you're not really used to doing that.
So safety, you've mentioned it already, but it must be of heightened concern considering like you said, it's similar to being on a construction site, and there's sometimes things, you know, large cranes, sometimes there's things over people's heads. Even when the grips come in, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the grips come in and put the riggings up for the lights to go in, right?
Yep.
So you work with the lighting team. So if that's done incorrectly, that could fall on someone's head. So there's a lot that could potentially go wrong.
There's a lot of safety checks we do to make sure things don't go wrong. You know, like I said, right down to the simplest, making sure that you're walking around and making sure all the lights have sandbags on them and all our stuff has sandbags on them.
Don't look at our set. Just don't look over. Don't.
It's studio. It's okay.
Okay, good.
We can get away with a lot more in studio. But yeah, safety is just something that naturally gets handed to us because we do deal with, you know, like large equipment and like you said, things over people's heads, things over very expensive actors' heads. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be known as the grip team that, you know, seriously injured Bryan Cranston and you know, or you know, just recently.
He shot a movie here, just so everyone knows.
Mm-hmm. I had no part of that movie.
Neither did I.
It was great. That was actually the time when I was going to do the background on Shoresy was when I was shooting.
Oh, okay.
There's a whole story there I can't really get into.
That's
but,
okay. We can assume some things.
Yeah. Most people that know me know why I wasn't a part of that show, but differences of opinion happen all the time. Mm-hmm. You move on and you go do background. So I'm sure over the years you've had some favorite shows that you've worked on here. As in terms of like either a favorite show in general or like what you've been able to do for your job. Well, I mean, at 37, I was able to knock off my bucket list movie, which was to do a big budget zombie movie, which
Resident Evil.
Awesome, yeah, which was awesome enough. Was part of a big franchise.
That shot in Sudbury.
Shot in Sudbury and Hamilton. But I mean, that was kind of a careful what you wish for scenario because it turned into 45 nights with rain towers in Northern Ontario at this time of year in November, October, November. You know, it's the only time I've ever seen them do wet downs of the roads where, you know, when the roads are all wet and shiny and nice, and then they've got to follow it with a salt truck because it's freezing as quick as they're putting the water down.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was, you know, you're standing in rain towers and you walk away from the rain tower and you bend your arm and ice flakes off. Yeah, it was careful when I had a lot of fun. It was definitely an experience. And like I said, it was a bucket list movie. And to be part of that franchise now for the rest of my life is super interesting because I played those games since I was a kid when the first one came out for the PlayStation, I think it was. And then, I mean, there's the ones where you kind of become like family with the crew, things like Cardinal, where, you know, I was the key grip for all 4 seasons and like the crew hardly ever changed. The cast was always the same with just new people here and there, and you develop relationships over that time frame that, you know, last forever. Like I still, on occasion, have emails with Billy Campbell, the lead actor of the show.
Really?
Yeah, he's a great guy. I had a lot of fun with him. He was a big fan of the old man game where it's like, oh, you got something on your shirt? And then he'd get you in the chin. Only one I'd ever see. He'd get me all the time. I was so gullible with him. But he was like, you know, like...
For 4 years, that joke still worked.
Yep.
Great.
Yep. You know, you talk about us stealing the Chief Commander 2 at the rap party, and he comes up and says, oh, you got something on your shirt? Okay, maybe we can take a smaller boat, Billy. Let's go steal a boat. All right. No, we didn't end up stealing a boat, but, you know, we did talk him out of it.
But there is one in your backyard that we won't talk about.
Yeah. It's a sailboat. And no.
You have I remember you having an interesting story of working on Cardinal when it was shadfly season here.
Oh, God. You tell production that shadflies in Northern Ontario are apocalyptic when they roll into the lights, and they don't believe you. They don't understand. It's like,
and the shadflies are a specialty here in Northern Ontario.
There's only a couple places in the world that get them on the level that we do here in North Bay, and it's
They rise from the lake.
Yeah, and they live for 24 hours. They breathe, they reproduce and die. Like that's their entire life.
And they smell like fish. Everything smells like
dead,
fish.
rotting fish everywhere. It's terrible. But when you play a bunch of big lights, or like anyone who lives in North Bay knows, you don't park under the lights during shadfly season. Because you will come back to your car and it will look like it's hairy. Yeah. The wind's blowing and all their wings are moving in unison. Well,
it's like a horror movie.
Yeah. And like we did one season of Cardinal, and we were shooting at the old, I think it was the old Chrysler on Lakeshore by the Wendy's. And we had a light on scaffolding, and we put it in, we turned it on as the sun was going down, and thankfully I never had to touch that light again, because within an hour the scaffolding looked like it was moving because all these shadflies was just landing on it and coated it. And you'd watch the electrics climb up the scaffolding, and they'd have to clean off the railings as they're going. And but you tell productions, the people from Toronto or wherever that come in, and it's like no, it's like one of the 7 plagues of the apocalypse. Like they come in and they blot out the sun. Like it's for a couple
of weeks. It's really just
it's disgustingly they blanket everything. But
this year wasn't as bad, but I remember one year it was the whole downtown, like you just stepped on the ground and it was just crunch,
slide, grease. I missed it all this year because I was gone all summer, home on weekends. It's the downside of doing what we do is sometimes you don't always get to work close to home. You know, like I've worked literally coast to coast in this country doing what I do, and many places in between. And sometimes you feel like a glorified carny because you're living in hotels and Airbnbs and sometimes
kind of what I feel like we are.
Yeah, we're glorified carnies. We come to town, set up a bunch of tents, put up a bunch of big lights, take some pictures, take it all down, and go away. Yep. It's an interesting life we've chosen.
Have you noticed a big difference between shooting in Northern Ontario and shooting in other cities or provinces, as far as like any, other than the shadflies, any particular obstacles or positives?
Everyone has their opinion of who has the worst mosquitoes, to be honest. Yeah, we did 6 months on a show on the East Coast, and our mosquito season's the worst. And
it's got to be here. It's got to be here.
It's here. Winnipeg, same thing. Oh, yeah, our black fly season is the worst. No, it's not. The joke on the East Coast was like, the seagulls still look like seagulls out there. They're not dependent on us. It's like, your seagulls can fight our seagulls, but our mosquitoes can take out your seagulls. your mosquito season's not bad. This is not bad.
That's horrifying.
Yeah,
I actually have an allergic reaction to mosquito bites. It might be black fly bites, actually, but like I completely welt up now.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about me. Maybe I'm dying inside or something, but they sense something is off and they just leave me alone now. We don't want his blood. You see everyone on set like, oh God, and you're like, what?
I've got that weird Italian and British blood mixture that they're like, it's tea time and meatballs. I don't know.
I'm Scotch Irish, so maybe it's like generations of pickling. I don't know. His blood's bad. Leave him alone.
You don't want it.
Yeah. But yeah, like everywhere has their own little niche claim to why they're the worst place to shoot.
When you shot in Winnipeg, what time of year was it?
I've done both. I've done middle of winter and I've done summer. Winter in Winnipeg, I will say, is worse than Northern Ontario's winter shooting.
Yeah. I've heard.
It's the cold's kind of on par. It's just the wind out there. I've never had to explain to a DP why I can't play a simple 4x4 frame because it's picking up a 300-pound man off the ground. The wind is so strong. It's it's ripping out of their hands. They're not even getting to the point where they're putting it in stands. It's so windy. And downtown Winnipeg's the worst because it's all the interlaced streets and everything. Everything turns into a big wind tunnel down there. It's Winterpeg, as they call it. It's one of the worst climates I've shot in the winter. Summer, it gets incredibly hot and the bugs aren't as bad as I say. they say the outlying areas are worse for the bugs in Winnipeg, but we were mostly in the city for that show. So maybe it was just because we were in the city. We had these weird inchworms that, like tent caterpillars almost. They're kind of on par with our shadflies in Winnipeg.
God.
You're walking down the road and you're doing this, and it looks like you're like trying a new age dance, but you're just dodging them as they're dropping from the trees. Yeah, no. You like pull them off your head. Oh,
Ew.
Yeah.
I think that's worse than shadflies.
Yeah, the webs get, especially someone like me, end up in your beard. But I notice there's like crew wise, there's a lot of people don't realize places like Vancouver and Toronto are the abnormal. They're not necessarily what every other local is like. Every other shooting area that I've ever been to is more like what we do here. It's a much smaller, tight-knit community of technicians and background, and they all know each other, and it's some have been doing it a lot longer than us, some have been doing it less than us, but they all have these relationships that are more on par with what we do up here versus what happens in the big metropolis of Toronto or Vancouver or even Calgary, and like even Winnipeg, which is a large city. Their local for technicians, I think, is only something like 700 members, which is only 200 more than 634 here.
Oh wow.
But then you compare that to Toronto, where there's like that's one department that's covered by the locals at 700 people, and they're a 8,000 member union. It's and you don't you may see someone one day and not see them for another 3 years on a show. Like it's a much different vibe in those big metropolises, but I find a lot of the other ones that I've been to are more like us. It's these, like I said, tight-knit communities that all know each other and all get sick of seeing each other every day.
But then on the flip side, you've built relationships with, like you were saying, with Wayne, where you can sort of read each other's minds at this point.
Yeah, and like, you've got your go-to people that you call when you need something in particular, and or you're excited because you've got that one big show that's going on in the area, and you can bring these other people with you who, you might have been competing with them for the show, but they're still the next best guy in line to bring onto your crew. That's one thing I'm noticing after 15 years of doing this is I'm now competing with guys and girls that I've brought into the industry, that I've given multiple of them their first job, and now I'm losing jobs to them.
Oh wow.
I mean, it's the sign of a healthy industry, like that we need these people to do the jobs, and frankly, some of them are now taking the jobs that I no longer want to touch with a 10-foot pole because I'm frankly too beat up from doing those jobs for too many years of having to be the key and dolly and third grip all in one, because you've been handed a bunch of, for essentially trainees who don't know their ass from a hole in a cube tap. Frankly, it's so it's nice that when I get the bigger shows, I can still bring these people together, and when they get the smaller shows, because you and I both know big shows up here are few and far between.
Yep.
So it's nice that if they beat me out on a smaller show, that they can now turn around and kind of repay the favor and bring me out, which guys like Craig Coupal have brought me out for shows. Mind you, that one he ended up leaving partway through, and I took over his key anyways. But it was still nice that he thought of me after the fact. We're not just competition; we're the next best option for whoever gets the role. Yeah. Like, if Craig books it, he can turn around and say, "Hey, do you want to be my assistant key, even though I beat you out?" Or I can get it and say, "Hey, Wayne, I may have beat you out for this one, but I got a key rigger spot. You want that?" It's you can kind of keep it within the family, so to speak, and make sure that the people that you're surrounding yourself with are not only helping you continue to work, but you're helping them continue to work, and vice versa. You can it's kind of nice to be able to flip those roles in within the grip department. A well-rounded grip should be able to do almost every grip job on set by the end of their career. Whether they choose to advance or not into the higher positions, they should know how to do them, so that when the next person calls and says, well, I've only got a third spot. It's like, sure, I can be a third. Well, I've got a dolly grip spot. I can be a dolly grip. It's nice to be interchangeable in that respect.
Is it also like an ego check too?
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know, if you've been key, that you're willing to take the third because it's work and you get to work with your teammates?
For a long time, like for a long time, being one of the first here, I was the only key. For a long time, I was the only third. So I would get bounced around from town to town to town wherever the shows decided to shoot. Same thing happened as a key. I was the only option. Now that there's more options, it's actually made things easier for me. I can say no to shows I don't want to do because I know I can still end up on that show and not have any of the responsibility, because after me, they're going to call Craig, or, you know, like Craig may have been booked and then they're going to call me after him, and or Wayne or Axel or whoever, all these other grips up here that can do pretty much every job in the department. The first time, I think I was a little stung when I lost out, because I had just gotten so used to being the guy that, you know, it kind of hits you. It's like, oh, these guys have come a long way from, you know, him showing up on set as a lift guy one day, not even part of film, just because we were sent an ungodly piece of crap lift, and they sent him, and he started rhyming off all his tickets, and I said, hey, you might work out in film. And, you know, now he's a camera operator. He's a key grip. Again, I'm talking about Craig. I met him on a movie called Unearthing, and they didn't have the biggest budget, and they sent us this lift that was mounted to the back of a truck, and it was an old cherry picker style, but we had to use it for lighting. Because it was on the back of a truck, it gets sent with a technician. That technician was Craig, and he noticed one of my tattoos, and we got talking, and turns out we knew a bunch of the same people, and I took his number, and, you know, it started as when we had a bunch of lift days, because I knew we had all these different tickets from this job he had. I was able to bring him in as a specialized guy who could do all these different things on set, to the point where now he can do every job on set. He's been a third, he's been a dolly grip, he's been a key, he's been an assist key. He's become more well-rounded at what he does from that time. But, you know, when I first lost out a show to him, I was like, but that's Craig. That's the guy who only knows how to do the lifts. And then I realized, it's like, oh no, that was 8 years ago where he was that guy who was just a lift guy.
Oh, wow.
Because, I mean, you often don't see their progression, because I can only bring so many people on my show as a crew, so they're forced to find other work, and you don't realize how far they're also advancing their careers, to the point where now I'm venturing into other markets. Like I'm working more in Toronto, and as much as I hate big cities, it's a spot that I feel like I've kind of yet to conquer. And, you know, from the early on, I didn't have the connections down there that I did up here to get the shows. I don't know the producers. I don't know the DPs. I don't know keys that are going to bring me into premium positions. It's taken a couple of years to start developing that. It was when guys like Wayne went down there, he landed What We Do in the Shadows. He would bring me out as his second unit key grip, and I met his key rigger, and then I went and did some besting for him on a show where I met another guy who brought me on to another show. And it's all about who you know down there, and not so much what your resume shows. Because this past year, I was throwing everything I had at trying to book a job as a key down there, and all I have is that production email, the same general one that everybody with little to no experience is saying, hey, I can be a key grip, throw in my resume, and then I get lost in thousands of resumes.
Yeah. It's just a lot about references, who you know. Yeah. Which
is, again, because they have these go-to like grips that they regularly use, you're like trying to get your foot in a door that's got 6 people leaning against it, and they're all key grips. So luckily now Wayne is giving me opportunities, and other people are giving me opportunities down there because they've made the transition because of connections they had. that I'm getting better opportunities down there, whether I was the assistant key rigging grip on the Chucky rigging team, or for part of it I was splitting time with someone else who was an actor in Shorzy Max.
Okay.
When they did the last season that he was in, they just didn't want to deal with I've got acting days this week, I'm not here, so I'm just going to not come back for the next portion. So I got to step into his role as assistant key for like 2 months or whatever it was.
That's fun.
Yeah. That's kind of nice too. You come in and most of the work's already done, and all you're doing is making sure people are booked for the next day, filling out the timesheets. And I tend to focus more recently on assistant key grip the last while because I think I kind of missed my niche. Turns out I'm actually pretty good at the job and dealing with production, and I like doing that side of it more so than the job I've done for the last probably 13 years as a set key.
So it's interesting how being forced in a position to have to take something a little bit lower down forces you to develop skills that you're like, oh, I actually am really good at this and I like it.
Yeah. Like I now know how to use things like Adobe.
Right.
Computers, that's really the only position in our department where computers play a huge kind of like role is those doing the timesheets and everything. It all used to be done by hand on paper. Now it's all digital. So it's like, okay, I got to learn how to do this now because I, buy myself a keyboard and look all professional with my iPad. And it's like,
and your new transition lenses.
Yeah,
well.
Not yet. No, I don't get those for another couple weeks.
Oh, okay.
But you rely on the people who have done that job long term. Like it's the other way the connections come into play is like I can go to Wayne as my key and say, all right, I know you've dealt with this, Wayne. Like I need X number of dailies this week. I want to book weeklies, and he can use his experience as an assist key to kind of fill in the gaps for me. Or the electric on the last show, she was calling herself the best electric because she doesn't like assistant gaffer, she didn't like second, she didn't like best girl, so she called herself just the best electric.
Okay.
But relying on her for things because she's done the job way more than I had, you tend to find the people that can help you fill in the gaps, as long as they're willing, because you definitely come across people that are not so willing.
Yeah, and I think that goes for every department in film too.
It definitely does, because 90% of the people are looking to advance themselves. And we're all kind of trapped in our own little worlds on set. We have no idea what the left hand's doing.
Yes.
I couldn't tell you what a makeup person does in a day. I couldn't tell you what Ash does in a day as a hair person. I know my department, and I know the electric department, and I know maybe construction if I'm working as a rigger, or picture cars because I have to rig a car they're going to bring me in a couple of days. Like we don't always know what everyone does on set. It's what they call organized chaos.
Yes.
And everyone is in their own little world, and that kind of rolls back into the safety thing, especially with our department when we're dealing with the lifts and everything, because people are so focused on what they're doing on set, and it's not done in a spiteful way or anything. It's just everyone kind of thinks their job is the most important on set.
Yeah, and everyone has tunnel vision for what they have to get done.
Exactly.
They're on like a time clock, like, hey, we have 4 minutes before we roll,
But what they don't realize is this is going to take us at least 10 minutes to move that lift from over here, but we can't do that because you're standing in the way, typing on your iPad, getting those continuity notes. It's or whatever the case may be. It's like herding kittens sometimes. It's like you're trying to run. As much as the first assistant director is running the floor, when it comes time to do things like move lifts around or the big frames that we set up or anything, is we take the floor. We need the space. What you're doing is now not important, just not important to what's happening at the moment, and it can happen off to the side.
Yeah, and it's potentially not safe for you.
Exactly. So we're always playing spotters. Like we don't move a big lift unless they've got a guy on the ground, a guy in the bucket, and people clearing the path as they're making their approach or whatever the case may be. It's not to sound too punny, but it's a big production. Like
yeah.
it's just to move something 10 feet on set sometimes, because that thing that's 10 feet is moving 10 feet weighs 70,000 pounds and you know, is dodging power lines and you know, weaving in and around cars, and you know, there's cops stopping traffic for us, and it's your head is always on a swivel in the grip department, looking for the next thing that could potentially go wrong and stepping in before it goes wrong. Like I said, the actor who's wandering around flipping their sides, reading lines, just paying attention to what their job is. But it's like that whole Austin Powers thing where it's the guy standing 30 feet away from the steamroller and the steamroller's rolling in on him at a very slow pace. It's like, we need you to move, or
Like
you're gonna
right
you're
now.
gonna get squished.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to be like that person who's aware of everything else that's going on around outside of your own department, because it is really slowing down your department.
Darren Sullivan and I, who we've recorded a separate podcast, we talked a bit about doing stand-in and how we both feel that doing that job has really given us a bird's eye view to like what every department does, and we get to literally it's our job to stand there, but like stand and watch how everyone works together. And I can't think of a time in all the years that I've been working on set, I can't think of a time that I've ever felt unsafe with, especially with a grip department, within the grip department of someone doing something overhead. You know, there's always they always make sure to tell us like, hey, you need to move, we're setting this up. As for in terms of everything being done in this area, I've always felt like the communication from that department especially has been really good.
It was something we pride ourselves on, is making sure everyone knows what we're doing while we're doing it. And if we need you to move, we're not going to hesitate. We're going to politely at first, until you don't move, say, hey, we need you to step out. And if not, then we go complain to the first AD who makes you step out, you know, or whatever the case may be.
My job is to be in the way until I'm told to not be in the way.
Well, exactly.
And then I'm not in the way.
Exactly. And then once we're done, you can go back to being in the way, because it's your portion of the job to do at that point. It's organized chaos, like I said, in that the different puzzle pieces all are being placed at different times, and you don't see the final picture until each piece is done. And sometimes that involves putting a piece on the board and taking it off the board and putting it back on the board, and tweaking. Some of the worst DPs to work for are the ones that tweak till the very end, to the point where we look like the assholes because they're ready to roll and we're still bringing stuff in because they don't know what they want. And yeah, the constant tweaking is it's something that's come about more in the digital age, because they think they have this extra time. There's very few people in the North who really got a taste of actual film. Everything's done on cards and digital, and
I think Oliver Sherman was done on film, and that was one of the last ones.
One of the last ones. I've done a couple more since then, but not in like the last 10 or 15 years. And it's a whole different vibe on set, because everything is so much more precise, because you can't just roll and roll and roll and roll. You have to call cut, and you have to reset, and mags roll out, and it was a much different way of doing things. You didn't have it all right there to look at it. Like, even things like, we do the green screens and blue screens on set when they create the images in behind. We're the ones who set up the screens. Way back when, you didn't know what that was going to look like until well after the fact. Now they can do a version where someone can go out and take a still or a short video of where the scene's going to actually take place, or they can use stock footage or whatever. If it's supposed to be, you're shooting it in studio, but it's supposed to be Times Square, New York, you can look at a monitor and have the angles of that all on the monitor now. Meanwhile, the actor's standing in front of just a blue screen.
Cool.
Yeah, it's technology has changed this industry a lot, that now people feel they can just continue to roll because it doesn't cost as much, because you just erase, you take the stuff off the card, you send it off, suddenly you get the card back. It's not the impermanence of it is quite a bit different. Like film, you shoot it, it's on the piece of film, it's done.
And you're making a decision.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas, variations on takes would be different. And if you did a variation of something, you did it with a real intent, not just because it was the whim of the director to say, maybe we should try it coming from this way now. Or there was much more precise planning involved. But a lot of people up here never got a taste of that.
Yeah. I mean, I only did a little bit of background on Oliver Sherman, but I can't say that I've actually acted on film as far as having a speaking role.
I never keyed anything on film, because even that apparently is a whole, like, the lighting's different, everything.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm.
Is it how the camera is taking in the light then?
Yeah. The director of photography from Resident Evil explained it to me best. You don't really realize how much information the digital cameras are sucking in when you shoot something. A lot of it becomes superfluous. You suddenly don't need these big, massive lights over here. You just need a much smaller LED light a little closer up, because the camera is just sucking in so much more information than they used to when it was on film. Like, he put what we call a LUT. A LUT is, they come up with a plan of what they want the overall darkness and look of the shots to be, and they can set that so that everything they shoot, they automatically will see that in their monitors, so that they know whether or not they need to bring up levels or bring down levels of lights or whatever the case may be. And we had the producers on Resident Evil come by the monitor and be like, no, this is too dark. Like, we need more lights. We need to bring this up. We can't see what's going on. And the director of photography just said, no. He calls his little data management technician and says, turn off the LUT. And suddenly you see what's truly being captured by the camera. What we were looking at was the particular look they were going for, but what's being pulled into the camera is just so much more bright and vibrant that it's too bright now for the and making the producers and that realize that you want to be pulling in all that information. We don't want to look at all that information right now, but you want to be pulling in all that information for later, for when you guys change your mind and suddenly this dark scene needs to be lighter as you have it. It's always easier to bring make an image brighter. No, what is it? Sorry. Scratch that. Flip it. It's always easier to bring an image down in post than it is to bring it up.
Right.
Because once you're out of it, you can do so much more in taking lighting away than you can with adding the lighting. Like, we've done day and dusk scenes that with a couple of filters, suddenly it's night. Or we do, I always called it ghetto night for day.
Ghetto night?
Yeah, because we don't have the money to shoot it at actual night, so we end up not putting up tents on windows to black everything out, but we just ND and colorize the windows so heavily that when you look outside, it looks like not necessarily night, but like late dusk or early evening, but it's all done practically at that point. But they can now do that in camera a lot of the time,
so
or
cool.
different filters they put in front of the lens. Everyone achieves their look different ways, whether it's filters in the camera or it's physical lighting around. All the directors of photography have their own kind of like niche way of doing things. Like, they have their particular flavors of things. Like, some guys will not let you do day for night because they can't see the street lights out the window, or the fake lights that we put up in the tents look terrible. It has to be night. Some guys are just like, we don't need to see out that window anyways, just close the blinds. But it's all their particular choice in terms of how they achieve the look. Like, the one where I was saying we just gelled the schnoz out of one of the windows to create this kind of like dusky feel. The DP had done it multiple times before and had great results, and we don't actually know how much we're going to do till we show up and we see how bright the sun is, because if it's a cloudy day, you're going to be doing less, or if it's a beautiful sunny day, you're going to be putting a lot more over those windows,
Right.
or you're having to cut direct sunlight with flags off the windows, but you never know until you show up on the day. Like we had this plan on Resident Evil. When we were in Hamilton, there was some stuff that involved kids that we had to shoot during the day because of actor turnarounds and different issues. We couldn't just run these 11-year-old kids into the ground all night. So we had to do some of their scenes during the day. But it was like this 4-story school, and like to tent all these windows would have involved a rigging team being there for a week, but we need to see it in day the next day, so we can't do that. So
Oh my God.
So there was a way that the director of photography did it, is we just put a bunch of orange gel over the window to look like street light, and then in the camera he dropped in a filter, and that was how we made night in like the where they raise children without parents. Orphanage. In the orphanage, that's how we did a lot of the lighting, was instead of building big tents, we just changed the color tones of everything.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is cool.
It was a combination of the digital stuff on the computer, the filter in front of the camera, and the gel we put on the windows that actually gave it the orange. Made everyone's lives quite a bit easier, especially ours, because my riggers didn't have to come in like 4 days before and build a bunch of tents, and like it actually looked like proper street light. And they can, because they've sucked in so much information now, they can tweak so much more than back on film, because on film you've got what you've got, and then there's very little changing that can go on after the fact in comparison.
It makes things a lot more creative, I think.
Oh yeah, the digital age has made a lot of changes in film. Like you look at the lighting people, the electrics, that's the word I was looking for. You look at the electrics, the LED lights have changed their world immensely. Now there's a position, they're called a board op, whose job is literally to sit at a computer or multiple computers and just change all the lights from this computer. The lights themselves, now we used to carry dozens and dozens and dozens of different colored rolls of gels to change the color tones of lights. Now with the LED, he does this, boop, and now suddenly your white light is blue or orange or
Right. I forgot that you guys had gels.
yeah. It's something that like we still do it for the bigger lights that use actual light bulbs and stuff that aren't LED, but in general, a lot of it, like things like Titan tubes that look like fluorescent tubes that have little computer brains in them, they have every color that's in these swatch books of color we used to get, that had every roll of color and diffusion that the companies that made them made, are all now programmed into these lights, and you just have to punch in a code and that color will come up.
Crazy.
And you can change the intensity and everything, all from, a lot of people can do it with an iPad.
I think Skymed was the first show that I've worked on where there was an actual board
up.
And then going back again to Natalie, that was my first show that I did stand-in on, and I remember being inside of a truck, and the electrics would come in and put lights like on the dashboard, and I remember just being like, oh, right, that, I guess you need to light my face, right? And at that time there wasn't, I don't know if it wasn't set up or they quite like this yet, or if they just weren't doing it like that, but they would have to actually come in and manually change it.
Sometimes they do have to manually change them still. Sometimes, technology is great when technology works.
Yeah. Sometimes
technology doesn't work. Like the Bluetooth signal or the Wi-Fi signal, whatever signal they use, I don't understand any side of that. Sometimes the signals don't work and they have to go in and change it manually, or like studio for whatever case, everything's all wired, so it's all hardwired to different receivers and that, so it's a little cleaner, I guess, also more reliable. But like when we went on the road on this last show on Accused, they had the electrics called it the Geek Van, because it honestly looks like a van that's set up like a surveillance van, because it's got all these screens and different boards and everything in it, and it's just a guy sitting in there tweaking all these different switches and everything for the different color tones of the lights and everything. And he would drive around this van, but if we were shooting in a basement and he was out in the van, then the connection wasn't as good, and then they would still have to manually do it. And like I was saying, like things like HMI lights or tungsten lights that still use bulbs, like incandescent bulbs, and that we still have to colorize to change the tones. We just do it far, far less than we used to.
You're still using the same gel.
Same
tool.
gels, same materials.
And by gel, just it's not actual gel.
No, it's an emulsion material that is think of like tint on a car. The rolls of tint you would put on a car, but in different colors. Although we do have neutral density tints very similar to car tints, but we have a range of different colors from pinks and purples and reds and oranges and blues, all that help provide different looks. Like we use a lot of blue for moonlight, or orange or sodium vapor for street lights, and they come on these 4-foot rolls, and there's about 50 feet of material on each of them, and we build them on these 4x frames, and then we slap them in front of the lights and pray to God the lights aren't hot enough that they burn through it. But it's they're expendables, some materials. We build and rebuild them over and over again because the lights will eventually either fade them or burn through them, or because those lights that we're doing that on are still the ones that burn the hottest on set. LEDs generate almost no heat in comparison, but they don't often have the punch or throw you need of light in certain scenarios. Like I was on a show recently where the DP wanted these LED fixtures on a 125-foot lift way across the street, lighting back up this building, and anyone who knew what they were doing before that lift even went in the air could say those LEDs aren't strong enough, they're not going to reach. And they didn't. So the next day when we came back to do it again, they had added more LEDs instead of putting one or two practical bulbed fixtures on there. But that's the trial and error of it sometimes. Maybe his choice was he wanted to be able to change the color at a whim, whereas on a 135-foot lift, we have to bring that down, take the gel off, put a new gel on, send it back up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a slower process, but it's a more powerful light, so there's trade-offs everywhere. In terms of gripping, though, the technology, aside from that, hasn't changed much for us in 120 years of filmmaking.
Wow.
Like, our biggest changes, we went from steel things to aluminum things. Like, we made things lighter for ourselves. We didn't, there's like things like camera support hasn't changed much. Like, the average dolly is still the same basic setup as 1940s bomb loading technology.
Really?
Yeah, they used to mount the bombs on them. The hydraulics would lift them up to the wing of the plane, and they could stay there so they could be mounted in place. Like, it's the same technology that we use in camera movement on the dollies.
Wow.
Yeah, if you watch things like movies within movies that are set in different time periods, like something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is shot recently but set in the 60s or 70s, they're on film sets, and you see these old tanks of dollies, but they look basically the same as what we're using today, maybe just bigger. We've managed to shrink things down as machined parts are now done by a computer or whatever. We've been able to make things smaller, and when I say smaller, the average dolly still weighs over 250 pounds.
Yeah, there's usually at least a few guys that take to lift that onto the track.
It takes 4 people to lift a dolly.
Yeah.
Which is always my argument when they say they don't want to have more than 4 people on a set. Well, then you don't want a dolly then, do you?
Right.
Because it takes 4 of us to lift it. Sorry. But that's really the only changes we made. Now, we've added different materials and stuff like that, but no changes in our world like the camera and lighting world. Grip world has been basically the same for the last, like I said, 120 years of filmmaking.
That says something.
Yeah, I've done one movie where we did the movie within a movie, where you start on a scene and all of a sudden you hear someone yell cut in the background and the cameras pull back and you're on a film set. I've done one of those, and it was set in, I think, the 50s. And they sent all this vintage gear, and I was like, I could have given you stuff off the truck. Like, our stuff has changed so little in that time period, like to the point where the art department set it all up, and the director of photography came over to me, and he was just like, hey, can you go play with that grip gear over there and make it look like it's actually doing stuff it would be doing in reality because set doesn't know what you do.
Wow.
So I had to go back and like tweak all these frames and stuff to make it look like they were actually, you know, the
Being
lights weren't
used.
even on, but yeah, it had to look like it was set up by professionals and not just, you know, things slapped on stands here and
Right.
there. But it was like basically the same gear we were using today.
That's
like,
crazy.
Yeah, there's very, very little changes.
What has been your proudest moment so far in your career?
Oof. Proudest moment. I would say my first key job, but that was a bit of a nightmare.
But that it could be proud that you got through it.
Yeah, I did get through it. They all kind of blend together. I mean, obviously, like my bucket list is pretty well ticked off now. Like I've done most of the types of shows I want to do. I've worked on sci-fi stuff. I've worked on cop dramas. I did my big budget zombie movie. That one holds a as much as I said it's a careful what you wish for scenario. It was still a bucket list movie. I mean, always getting to meet people that other people dream about meeting. Like now I'm just kind of indifferent. Like I can kind of let some of the cat out of the bag because 2 episodes have aired, but like the show I just worked on, Accused, was as an anthology. So think like something along the lines of Black Mirror, where every episode is different cast, different story, but it all takes place in a courtroom and out in the city streets or whatever. But like the cast we had roll through for each episode was ridiculous. Like I think they made it the first episode. I know it's aired and I've seen it in commercials, so I'm not spoiling anything. But like William H. Macy,
Oh, cool.
mind-boggling. Like
Yeah.
I've hung out and talked tattoos with Ethan Hawke.
Wow.
You know, I've held bounce light on Morpheus, like Lawrence Fishburne.
Holy.
I've met Bill Paxton, Bill Pullman. The people you meet and you tell people this, they're awestruck. Like Ash said in hers, her first real show where she actually got paid was, you know, Ryan Reynolds was there,
Yeah.
like Canadian royalty. My first show was Kids in the Hall. That comedy troupe has been a part of my life since like I was 10 years old. I used to love them growing up. And then to get to meet them all was great. The experiences, the places I've gotten to go. I've never gotten to leave the country, but I have literally worked coast to coast in this country because of what I do. Getting to see places I would have never seen in Canada otherwise, like the small native reserves 14 and a half hours north of Vancouver proper on the coast. Nova Scotia for 6 months,
Yeah.
Winnipeg, Montreal, Toronto. Actually, that's about it. But like, just
That's a lot. Yeah.
just getting, and they pay me to do it. They not only do they pay me, they give me per diem to do it. They're paying for my flights to get there or to drive. It's I think just in general, like being able to do what I do across country is probably the proudest thing I have. Like being recognized, because it's one thing to be advanced up here, as you know, in the early days I used to call myself the tax credit key, because
Right.
I was someone who was adequate enough at the job that I could fill the role and, you know, not make sure no one got killed. I
Always a bonus.
always a bonus. But like getting to go out east or out west, you're kind of, or Winnipeg, which is still out west, but you're getting recognized for your ability, not for what you can save them.
Yeah.
Which is kind of nice, and it's kind of proud when I get those shows. It's a little different, like in Toronto, because if you're a part of the local down there, you work as if you live there. They're not bringing me there because I started a show up here that moved down there or whatever, which has happened. But like in general, if I'm vying to get a show down there, I have to work as if I live there. I'm not being shipped out there because there's no other grips left and they know I'm a good grip from somewhere else.
Right.
Which was the case in the East Coast. Is like the East Coast, for example, can't handle more than 3 or 4 big shows at a single time, so they have to, same as us. We can't handle a bunch of shows all at once as a technicians union, so they have to bring people from other places, more often than not Toronto for us, but I've worked with gaffers from Vancouver in Northern Ontario and grips from BC and you know, East Coast talent, and you know, one guy from Saskatoon who was a gaffer. Mind you, that was in Winnipeg, and it didn't go so well for him. But, you know, to know that there's technicians in Saskatoon is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But it all kind of, just being recognized for what I can bring to the table somewhere else where all they're doing is looking at a resume with my name and credits on it. And that's always a big one, too, is seeing your name on the credits for the first time, which... I mean, because my first show was on TV. Normally on TV, it's in the grip department, they list the key, the assistant key, and then maybe the dolly grips. The thirds don't get recognized. The dailies don't get recognized.
Really?
Yeah, because the credits fly by so fast that you just don't see it. Now on Kids in the Hall, because I was just a weekly, there's no... Aside from, unless I could find a pay stub somewhere, there's nothing that says I worked on that. Like, it's not even on my IMDb.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's other people added themselves. I just never bothered. But, like, in general, I think my first on-screen credit was Oliver Sherman. And then way too many to remember after that.
Yeah, that is a cool moment, though, to be able to see your name in the credits. Yep.
Yeah.
It's just like when I do background, there's I don't get a credit for that. But when I get a speaking role, there's a credit for that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's a bit of a trip. Like, I know millions of people around the world have seen my name, whether they realize it or not. It's kind of neat. Which actually led me to find there's an actor, and I'm trying to find out if we're related, because he's British. But my full name is Tyler Robert Emms. His name is Robert Emms. And he's been in, like, some Star Wars stuff. And
Is his middle name Tyler?
I hope it is. But Emms, my last name, is such a... there's not a lot of us. So I'm hoping through, like, different connections that I have in this industry that I can eventually make a path to this guy, like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon style, and find out if I'm related to this guy, because we don't have a lot of family out there, and to find out that there might be someone else in the industry who is on the other side of the camera that I'm actually related to would be kind of neat. Like,
No kidding.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there's other Emmses in the industry. Like, my nephew is he's a carp within our union, so there is other Emmses that get to show up in the credits. But, you know, someone have that much of, like, 2/3 of my name as his name is kind of...
It's creepy.
Yeah. And you see it, and you see him too. We don't look anything alike or anything like that, so I doubt there's relation. But I'm always curious if someone that I know in the industry has ever met Robert Emms. Hasn't happened yet after 15 years.
I feel like someone with their investigative...
That's it. I've met enough British actors now. Like, come on, guys. Help me out.
Someone out there knows how to find out this information. I feel like if people online are solving murder mysteries, I'm pretty sure they can figure this out for you. Yeah. Has there ever been a time where you've just thought to yourself, you know what, I'm packing this in. This is too inconsistent.
Oh, God. More times than I can count.
Yeah.
Every time it gets slow. Like,
so what keeps you through that? What brings you through it?
The fact that I now, after 15 years, have no other discernible life skills. I'm a grip through and through.
That'll do it.
Yeah, I dread the day when AI takes over and wipes out all the jobs, because I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. It's
we'll be dead by then. It's gonna be fine.
Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully.
I mean.
But I started, because I came out of university, and I started working in hotels at a university. Logical step.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
But
especially when you studied film.
Yeah, and English and theology. I was supposed to be a teacher, and I realized that I didn't want to be surrounded by teens and kids and entitlement. So I had a plan. I was going to jump ship and go to Australia for a year, but you have to make X amount of money to be able to get a visa to go to Australia, and I just ended up slaving.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you have to hold, at the time, like 17 years ago, it was like you had to hold at least $5,000 in your account before they would even consider to grant you a visa to go work there. So I ended up slaving away in hotels and quit after like 3 years in 2 different hotels.
The hotel business is a tough one.
It was but I quit to be a daily on Kids in the Hall, not even being guaranteed 3 days a week on set as a grip for 5 weeks. So thankfully that worked out. But now it's left me with, I'm 41, and if this industry ever disappeared, I don't know what I would do with myself. Like even during the COVID, even during COVID and the most recent strike, like I had thoughts of like I need out, but where do I go now? First of all, where do I go that's going to pay me as well? Because I like to take a lot of time off, and this job affords me being able to do that. Like I can go months without work, and it's great as long as I've
planned it.
Exactly. The strike, not so much planning went to that. COVID, not so much. Like most of the people during COVID, like especially up here, some of us had just gotten back to work. Like as you know, our season doesn't start sometimes till March, April, May, and COVID hit March, like mid-March 13th. I was on one of the few shows going on working as a third electric, and suddenly it was like, yeah, you guys don't have jobs tomorrow because the whole world is shutting down.
It was scary.
And I was supposed to go down and like work on Titans in Toronto, and I that's who I was on the phone with. Was the world was shutting down. Was the key grip who was supposed to do Titans. I'm like, what do you know? Like, you're working on a real show. You got to be getting more information than I am about this. And he was like, as far as I know, we're going. And then the next day, and no one had work, and everyone was freaking out because, you know, like I had made, I think like $6,000, but I had just been off like 2 months before getting that 3 weeks worth of work. So I drained my savings, and you know, like Ash couldn't do hair at all, shop or shows. I ended up working for a buddy for like $18 an hour under the table and doing construction and renos, and he was getting ready to bump me up to his assistant wage of 20, and I was like, I haven't made $20 an hour in like 10 years. How do I live on this?
I know I've had to take regular jobs as well, and it's impossible to, you know.
And we by no means live beyond our means. Like we have a very modest house we bought like 10 years ago. It just doing this pace, and that's what people really don't understand about film either, is they're like, wow, you make so much money over, you know, business. Like, yeah, but I could go 6 months without working, or I could go 3 or 4 months without working, not always by choice either. You know, like I call them the old guard, the guys who have been around since like the 80s that do what we do, and some of the stuff that they've gone through, like SARS, COVID, strikes, multiple strikes. It's a really or just, you know, in general, like people not watching TV as much. It's really an up and down industry when it comes to when work is there, take it, and when it's not, hope for the best, hope you squirreled. And that's the other thing, is like you get all these guys that are like, well, you should be saving. It's like, yeah, but I'm doing 4 18-day shows this week that are paying me, or this year, that are paying me a fraction of what you're doing in the big city on one big show. Like, I'm barely covering my expenses to keep doing this sometimes. Which is also why, you know, when Toronto knocks on the door and says, hey, we've got this like 8-month job, then, you know, sometimes you just have to suck it up and go do an 8-month job, because, you know, I can take 12 months off after that and not do nothing. But it's left me in this world where it's like, if this industry were to disappear tomorrow, I have no clue what I would do with my life. That would keep me as financially sound and be as what I still consider rewarding. Because and that's the thing is people always assume it's so glamorous to do what we do, and it's like
The least.
yeah, I'm a big ball of stress and anxiety
And everyone's walking around with like 10 layers on. We're putting them on. We're taking them off throughout
Yep.
the day. It's raining. It's snowing. I think I remember you at one point saying years ago, you were like, because it was like really weird weather that day. And you were like, hey, it's Northern Ontario. If you don't like the weather, just
wait 5 minutes. Yeah. I still use that.
It's still funny because it's still relevant.
Yeah.
But it's to your point. It's just like, we're shooting in strange places. And there's nothing glamorous about it. I mean, the movie magic is that it looks however it looks on camera, but in order to work on set is not a glamorous thing.
Well, and I remember like early on, and I think it was Oliver Sherman, and it was the gaffer on that. We ended up, I think it was one lunch break or whatever, and he took the shuttles to set, and I had my own vehicle, so he hung out in my truck while it was raining at lunch one day, and he says to me, how long you been doing this? I was like, oh, this is my second show, so like 7 weeks in total. He's like, get out now. Whoa. I'm like, are you not supposed to be encouraging here?
Yeah.
No, get out now. Get yourself a real job. Get out now. And they're going to pull the tax credit in a couple of years. And for the first 3 to 4 years of doing this, that's all I heard was they're going to pull the tax credits, and eventually no one's going to come up here and film anymore, and you'll never have union locals up there, and the tax credit will disappear and it'll all go away. And so like that never helped either, on top of the regular stress and anxiety of what we do. Having that fear that like the bubble's just going to burst tomorrow with no warning added that much more. Like I'd like to say like I have been going gray since I was 19, but
Same here.
But it's been, thanks to this industry that it's really filled out in the last little while.
But
so
despite that, you've persevered.
I have, and many of us have. A lot of us had, all while looking for an escape route.
Right. Well, you've got your day rigging.
Yeah.
Set.
Either that or Jenny up, which power, kill everyone on set. Comes with its own stress and anxiety. But no, like I said, if this was to disappear tomorrow, I'm up that creek without a paddle. Like I've got one choice at this point in my life, and so that's why when everyone was so up in arms that AI had become this heavy thing in the last actor and writer negotiations, it's like, no, that doesn't just impact the actors and writers. They're the ones that this has fallen upon to fight for all of us.
Yeah.
And like I remember Facebook conversations with people and stuff about it, and they're like, wow, I've never seen a computer carry a sandbag. It's like, no, what you don't understand is that when the time comes, there will be no sandbag. There will be no lighting. There will be no actors on set. There will be dozens of people sitting at computers writing a story, and then the computer creating that story. Like when you look at things like what Unreal Engine 5 does for gaming and stuff nowadays, it's becoming almost indistinguishable from what your eye can see on the screen. Like it's ridiculous. Like even the crap on TikTok that's like AI generated stuff of actors and different locations and stuff. It's crazy. 5 years ago that shit didn't exist.
No, it is scary how things are advancing. I will say though that you cannot replace human experiences.
It's true.
So I do strongly feel like AI, it may creep in there, it may try to take over everything, but I think we're going to see a bounce back if people want to hang on to some sort of humanity.
Well, and that's the thing is there's always going to be, it becomes a cost thing. AI is still very, very expensive. And the technology, frankly, isn't quite there yet to give you a full, say, feature-length film from a computer. When it gets there, once the cost comes down, that's when the real fear hits. When it becomes cheaper to pay 24 computer technicians to sit in a room than it does to pay 100 people on a set to shoot it, that's when you're going to see the shift happen. And like you said, hopefully we're well gone before that happens. But it is a fear with in the industry that needs to be kind of addressed now, which is what the actors and the writers in the US were doing, making AI such a big part of what they do already, because things of like Chat GPT, like I play with Chat GPT for all of 5 minutes, but it can write you a story based on like the simplest of input. I want a story about a red ball in a green hat rolling down a hill, and I want it in the genre of science fiction, and it will give you like this blurb in seconds.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, it's scary, yeah.
It's
But again, it's you know, us humans have our own experiences, and if you're going to sit down and write something, you're probably going to base some of it off of either your own experiences or someone you know.
Oh, absolutely.
So AI can't take that away from us. Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. And like I said, we said, I hope it's long after the fact and we're all gone and done with in this industry, but
That's right.
there's always pitfalls and fears in working like in an industry with a lot of uncertainty. You know, like I just finished a 4-month show, and I squirreled away as much of my money as I could from that while paying off everything else, because I don't know now when the next one's coming. Because I've done things like made myself an incorporated business, I no longer qualify for things like EI. The safety nets are gone. But it's you know something else is coming, you just don't know when. I have a benefit that a lot of people up north don't, is I'm a member of both technicians unions in Toronto and Northern Ontario, which Toronto being the major hub that it is, I can always find something as long as they have something going on. You know, like within a week of being done, I had friends reaching out asking me if I wanted to do days on Handmaid's Tale. You really want to make some money? That's a show to do it. Not because they pay any better than anyone else,
Long days.
but long days.
Yeah.
And they have the money to pay for those days. Like,
Right.
and you're doing. I mean, it was different the last time I worked on it, because they were playing a lot of catch up, because before I got there they had a lot of COVID shutdowns and stuff like that. So they were, 6 days, 7 days, 17-hour, 18-hour days with no lunch break, and
Wow.
where we're in meal penalty just all day.
Holy.
Yeah, like as a third, on the lowest end of the pay scale, I was making more as a third than I would make to key some shows up here.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like it's two different worlds in terms
Yeah.
of budgeting. Like we get, the biggest thing I think we've had is the SkyMed, the Cardinal, Resident Evil, which Resident Evil's budget, I think when it first came up here, was something like $40 million, which was astronomical, unheard of here in Northern Ontario. But in the grand scheme of film and television, it's not a whole lot of money. Like you take something like Handmaid's Tale, and their budget is easily double or triple that. Like it's ridiculous. Or you drive around the studio districts in Toronto and you see like something like Star Trek or Frankenstein, and they've got full ships built in, like not spaceships, but like old timey, like came over the ocean on the wind ships.
Wow.
Built in studio parking lots. It's like, yeah, that show's got some money.
Yeah, they've got a pretty penny stacked up. If someone wanted to get into gripping,
Sure, after I've painted this picture
Yeah.
of doom and gloom.
even if after they're still like, you know what, I'm gonna try it, because it's good to hear both sides of it. But regardless of the negatives, people still choose the career and continue to work in it. What would be a good starting place for someone?
I mean, your work ethic is always the biggest thing when you get into a department like gripping, because having a good work ethic is not something you can teach. I can teach anyone to grip. Teaching someone to hustle is not something you can do. To get your name out there, it's who you know. Like, look for the connections. Join the Facebook groups that put out the casting calls and stuff like that. Like, even if it's not technician calls, if it's casting calls. Because if they're looking for cast, they're looking for crew.
Right.
Get yourself signed up as permits with the unions. IATSE 634 in Northern Ontario, 873 in Toronto, because you're going to reach people in that market, Jen. I have faith in this.
Hopefully.
You have to get in touch with the unions. You have to just like there used to be websites that existed, things like Mandy.com, and then I don't even know if those are a thing anymore.
I don't know, but I know what you're talking about.
They used to list like for independents and that. Now all I know is to preach the union method of getting in, which is to get yourself on the permit lists, and permit you can do with next to no experience. Like you don't need a whole lot of experience to become a permit.
Do you need to go to an orientation?
You do,
first?
which is for our local, it's like a 5 to 7 hour course over Zoom. I think they still do it. Ash hosts it with our union president Tiffany. But after that, you're basically good to start working. And what a lot of people don't understand about union work, though, is being part of a union does not guarantee you a job.
Yep.
Being part of a union guarantees you're protected while at a job. So doing the legwork is still on you. You still have to put in the effort of getting your name out there, getting your resumes to people you know work in the industry, that even if they're not in the department you're looking to get into, they're in cahoots with the department, or they know someone who knows someone. Same way I did it. I answered that radio ad. I fell in with the key. I hounded that key about every show that came up north. That kind of boils back to the you can't teach someone to hustle, and that's all. Even to this day, to get my next job, I'm still hustling to get my next job. Like don't tell Wayne, but I'm sitting in the truck doing my paperwork, but I'm also going through the list of shows that are coming up, sending in my resume to the next one.
Well, you have to.
You continuously have to grind. It's a grind. I came close. I had put all my efforts into Wayne, and I made a deal. It's like, if you book something, I'll take a premium spot on your show. If I book something, you come be my key rigger. I threw all my efforts at Crystal Lake, which was it was supposed to be like, I guess, a prequel series to the Friday the 13th. Like I without knowing anything about the script or anything, I was calling it Jason Voorhees the younger years. I was in touch with the line producer. I'd started the conversations, and then all of a sudden it was gone. It had just showed up on our hot lists, and then a week later it had disappeared. It turned out Peacock dropped it, their showrunner left.
Oh, man.
So everything I had put my efforts into for the last few weeks of trying to book this show was now suddenly gone. Every job you get is a fight, but you have to start the fight to be able to win the prize.
And don't let the disappointments drag you down.
I've lost more shows than I've ever booked.
Yeah.
And it's a grind, and it will wear you down. It will. Sometimes you'll want to kick yourself for ever getting into it, or sometimes you'll kick yourself for not getting out when you had that chance. But in the end, if you're not willing to put in the work to find the next show, you may not have what it takes, because it's going to wear you down. You're gonna love it. It's the best part-time, full-time job you will ever have, but it's unintentionally seasonal work. Like we work for months at a time, and you're gonna have to explain to someone the rest of your life what you do, and even down to the simplest things like getting yourself a mortgage. It's really hard to try and buy a house when you don't have a job. You got this money lying around, and realtor looks at you and says, but you don't have a job and you want to buy a house right now?
Or you do have a job and they're like, yeah, but you've only been with that employer for a month.
Yeah.
Or that other employer for a month, and so they don't understand. That's like, no, I'm a contract worker.
That's it. And that was part of the reason why I became an incorporated business. Is now don't get me, luckily we bought our house in my first year of incorporation, so they could go back and look at my T4s and everything from previous years.
Yeah.
But we had to cut out realtors, go straight to the bank, do everything ourselves, because realtors wouldn't touch us, because both Ash and I didn't have a job while we were looking for a house.
Wow.
But it's like, if we have a job, then we don't have time to look for a house.
Yes, yeah.
We don't get typical weekends, and when we do, you're sleeping. You're trying to catch up on the rest of your life because you didn't get to go home at 5 o'clock on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday.
Fridays are often a fratter day.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
you're
you
getting
lose
home at
half
4
your
in the morning.
Saturday from sleeping.
Yeah.
That's the toughest part about working in Toronto is I come home almost every weekend. So
Oh, do you?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
It's I the last time I worked on Handmaids, I did like 7 weeks. And between Handmaids and Chucky, I think I put something like 18,000 kilometers on my truck in the span of 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah. This time around, I was coming home almost every weekend, and which was all right because we ended a lot of our days on Fridays, which was studio or whatever,
Okay.
and we weren't necessarily shooting till the wee hours of the morning. But there were a few times where it's like 3, 4 in the morning, and I was already supposed to be on the road, but we're still shooting, and I still have a truck to back when they call wrap. And but if I don't, then I don't get to see family or the dogs or whatever. So it's a sacrifice you make to be able to do the things we do and the way we do them. Eventually, though, you got to make yourself take a break. Like there were a few weekends where it was like 4 or 5 in the morning. I was like, I'm actually better when the sun comes up. But then you realize because your call time on Thursday wasn't quite as late as it was on Friday, you still woke up at 11 a.m. on Friday morning and didn't start till 4. So you've actually already been up for almost 24 hours, and you just don't realize it. So you gotta limit yourself to how far you can actually push your body. Because it's exhausting what we do. It physically, mentally, it's a challenge. I've seen a lot of people fizzle out in this industry or decide that they can't travel anymore because of they can't be away from their significant other, or they've been from Toronto and come up here to do shows, but they've never done that before, and they got a wife and kids sitting at home, and within the first week they're missing them because they don't get to come home every night or whatever the case may be, and they bail. It's I'm not going to go into too much, but one of the earliest statistics I ever heard about film was there's between someone who works in film who has a spouse that doesn't work in film, there's like an 85% divorce rate. Like,
whoa.
Yeah, it's because like there's time changes, and you know you tell your significant other, oh, I'm gonna be home at 11 tonight, and 2 o'clock in the morning rolls around and you're still not home. It's like, I mean, it's a little easier now with technology. You can text and say, hey, I'm not gonna be when I said I was gonna be, but like
Someone who works in film understands, like, oh, hey, we had to go long. You don't even need to give someone a full explanation of that. It's like, yeah, the day turned to shit. We're going long, and I'm not going to be home for a while. And someone in film will understand that.
Yeah.
Where someone who's not in film may not understand what, well, you know, you've already worked 12 hours. How could they? It's like, no, well, we only have this location today. We have to continue.
Yeah, we got to finish.
Yeah.
But why do you have to finish? Because we can't come back here tomorrow. What aren't you getting about that? Well, why can't you come back? Because it will cost them this much more.
Or the actor isn't available.
Yeah, the actor's flight is at 3 a.m. back to L.A. And, like, you know, we've had actors bring in private planes that just, that happened on the last show. Yeah. Transport had to have someone just sitting at the airport waiting because the actor was like, I'm getting a private jet. Not sure when I'm going to leave yet or when I'm going to land. It'll be sometime during the day of the 18th or whatever the day may have been.
Holy smokes.
Excuse me. But just on a whim decided they were going to take a private jet, so Transport had to have someone waiting at the airport for whenever this actor may show up. Wow. When we're done, I'll tell you who it was. I can't say it on the air because his episode... Yeah, secrets. His episode hasn't aired yet, so I can't say it on air.
That's fair.
And I mean, you've got to learn to make sacrifices too. Like, I haven't seen Ash in, I think it's going on 3 weeks now because she went out east to go do her show, and I've been commuting back and forth to Toronto all summer. It's now luckily we've both been doing it long enough that we understand that, like, sometimes this happens, and not to, but we both kind of don't suck at what we do, so we can get ourselves on a lot of the same shows so we see each other more. But you can go weeks, months. Like, if she had, like, when we went out east, we both went to do that show in 2021, The Sinner, which was great. We brought the dogs. It was like 6 months in an Airbnb, and we got to go tour around and see all of Nova Scotia and everything. But because it was COVID, there was no leaving. So like,
Oh, right.
that was very contingent on whether or not I took the show, was whether or not she got a job on the show, because that's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
6 months.
And it's very far from
sequestered.
here.
Well, it's it's a 20-hour drive.
Yeah.
2-day drive, which we did in 2 days in 2 separate vehicles, because we start at wildly different times during the day. That unless they were going to get us a rental on the other end, we needed 2 separate vehicles. But I wouldn't give them a yes until they gave her a yes, because I wasn't going to go out there and now be cut off for 6 months from my entire life.
Yeah, that's a very long time.
Yeah, which I mean, it'd be a little different now, like, because you can fly home on a hiatus week or long weekend or whatever. But back then in COVID, it was like, no, you can't leave. And in fact, when we got there, we had to sit in the Airbnb for 14 days and do nothing aside from go for a walk for an hour a day, because of the whole East Coast bubble thing they had going on.
Yeah.
I had to get one of my thirds that lived in Dartmouth to go to a Best Buy in Halifax to pick me up a TV to bring out to my Airbnb like 45 minutes away, because we didn't have a TV in our Airbnb, and we were like, we're only allowed out for an hour a day. Like,
oh my God.
what are we going to do for the next 14 days? I tried watching stuff on my iPad. My eyes started getting tired after like an hour. I was like, I don't have any books. There's no bookstores in Chester. There's I can go sit out in the backyard with the dogs, but like, I need something.
Yeah, you
so
need
I
a TV.
sent this 23-year-old kid, hey, you haven't met me yet. Can you go to Best Buy and give me a TV? Here's gas money. Get some snacks. Get some food. It was, that was a whole other world of filming during COVID. So many different things that were unusual, like, and the different rules from show to show to show were odd too. Like, I remember what we do in the shadows. It was, like some shows, if you were in direct contact with cast, like your hair, makeup, you were in a mask and a face shield and gloves or sanitized. Goggles, what we do in the shadows, even though we were in studio and there's like basically the entirety of a mansion built in the stages, didn't matter if there was an actor anywhere in that stage. Didn't matter if they were in set on the other side of a wall that you couldn't breathe through, whatever. You had to be in face shield, the full garb. It was. But then in other shows were like, oh, we don't even care if you wear an N95. Like COVID was a different time for film. Like,
yeah, I remember doing stand-in and everything had to be wiped down, even if I sat on a chair.
Yeah.
That the actor was going to sit on, they had to wipe down the chair.
Well, and try being a stand-in with a white mask on. And it's like,
for them to light it.
Yeah.
I don't even know how they did it.
Can you pull your mask down? No, I can't. Can you?
I think one time they got me to roll it up just to the chin, just to see the shadow in from my neck. I was like, I remember thinking like the DPs, they really know their stuff. In order to light with me wearing a mask, like I don't know how they did it.
No, it created a bunch of different rules that like most of them are gone now. But it kind of forced a lot of issues in the industry too, like things like direct deposit. Suddenly, which now shows are shying away from because it costs more apparently to do direct deposit than to sign a bunch of physical checks.
I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, like the last show we did, Accused, they were entertainment partners, which is the main payroll company that they use, and they were still giving out physical checks, even though direct deposit was a thing, and like people were mind blown by that. I think it's fine. I don't really care as long as the money shows up in the end. Like,
for me, when I do background, I often get my check mailed, so I'm not on set to receive it.
Right.
So sometimes it's like a week difference.
Yeah.
Direct deposit, I get it, a week before I would have if it was mailed to me. So. Well,
that was like the last couple of checks I had from Accused, because they came from Toronto in the mail. Like because I have those accounting connections as the assistant key. Hey, can you make sure Wayne and Mai's check goes in the mail on Thursday or Friday, because it was a holiday week, when they're cut, and not wait till Monday or Tuesday. after everyone's come in and picked through them, like, can you just send ours right away? And it still took over a week, to the point where my second last check showed up the day before my last check.
No.
Yeah, because by that point he just threw them in the mail for us anyways, and he knew for the last one, but it took that much time with the holiday and everything to like catch up. Whereas if they had just done direct deposit, you know, I would have had it the day of. I wasn't waiting around.
Well, I don't blame you. Listen, I've had so much fun talking to you. We could sit here and talk for another week straight, I swear. But I really appreciate you giving us a full scope of what the gripping department is like. And, you know, I also appreciate that you've given us both sides, the positive and the negative, because that's the reality of it.
I try to be a realist when it comes to the whole industry, like, because I don't like to sugarcoat things. You're going to love it, but you're going to hate it. Like any other job, it's going to be that much more of a roller coaster in this industry.
But if you love it, then the hard days are going to be easier to get through, because there's the next day you're still going to wake up with some kind of passion there.
Like during COVID, I did a bit of roofing, and I will take any 18-hour day on set versus 6 hours on a hot roof in July any day of the week. Like there are far worse jobs in the world out there to have. It's been fun. It's been a trip.
It's been a trip. Well, that's good. If anyone wanted to follow you on social media, where would they do that?
Insta. That's about it.
Okay.
T.Emms. Grip. Yeah, I'm a simple character.
That's fine.
I don't put a whole lot on there, but I mean, I've got some things I've built on there. Like if you go into the earlier photos, more recently with their swings and timing and that, I haven't posted a lot of actual work related ones, but that's pretty much it. I mean, I have Facebook, but that's mostly for friends and family.
That's fair.
I'm on TikTok, but that's only if you want to go see crappily shot videos of concerts I've been to.
I think we do. So head on over to his TikTok as well. I'm going to put the links in the show notes for everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.